right, so drywall holes, these are very common to see on home inspections, and you shouldn't be really too worried about it. It is a maintenance problem. It can be easily resolved by a DIY project such as this, or if it's a little bit more complicated, you might want to get a drywall repair contractor or handyman to help you in this situation. But, so we had some old hardware here, it got removed, and of course there were some holes left behind. And before I can paint my room, I need to go ahead and fill in this hole. What we're gonna be using is some dry decks. This is a DAP product. It goes on pink, and then when it's done drying, it's white. That white lets me know, okay, it's time to go ahead and sand this back down. The other tool you're gonna need is you're gonna need a spatula. Both of these things together at your local hardware store should be no more than $15. And the project timeline to take this and get it done should take more than 5 minutes of your actual time, probably another 10 to 12 minutes waiting for the drying, and then going from there, sanding, painting, those all add up later down the road. But overall, this is a very easy process, and here's how we do it. So the first thing I'm gonna wanna do is gonna go ahead and sand off any of this rough area where the paint is coming off a little bit on the outside of the hole. Once I got that squared away here, we're gonna go ahead and open up the dry decks and get started. Now, this material, when you look at it, is pink. So be a little generous with it. It's all right. It's already pre-mixed. And we're just gonna apply it directly over the hole. And then I'm using the flat side of the spatula to spread it. And then when I need to clean it up, I use a downward motion or a cross motion to go ahead and get that dry decks in there. Now sometimes it does not want to apply it right away, and there may be gaps like this guy right here that's starting. Just come back later after a majority of it has dried, and then you can put a second coat over this to kind of help material stay in that hole. And with that, we're almost done. Just want to make sure we get good even coatage across the entire wall. Let that dry for a little bit, then we'll come back and sand it. So same thing here, we have another small hole. You can see this one's been a little bit more cleaned up. It's a little bit easier to work with. So we'll just come back here, make sure we sand off all the excess paint that is around this guy. Come back in, and then we'll use the dry decks here as well. Use a little bit less this time than we did the first time around. Get a first good clean cut on that, and then boom. It's just that simple. Let that dry for a little bit, then come back, brush it, sand it, and then we're good to go. Now, drywall anchors can be a pain in the butt to get out, but what we'll do is we'll come back behind here, get all these nail holes real quick, and we'll remove this guy real quick. Always use a Phillips or a flathead screwdriver. Just do that guy out real quick, take that guy out, and come back behind and really get that hole sanded down, make sure there's no excess material, and then you can come back behind that and start patching these holes that are on the wall. And I just need a little bit more material. All right, to go a little bit more generous, it just means you have to use more sanding. If you left it like this versus if you do a nice clean coat like this, it makes it a little bit easier to come back and sand that down. All right, so we come back here and we're gonna go ahead and sand down a lot of this excess material and even it back out to a nice smooth finish. And in places like this where we have these little divots, we can come back in with more DAP and correct that and make sure it's a nice smooth finish over the wall as a whole. Up here on this wall, we did these nail holes here. There's a little bit of a bump out on each one of these guys from where we applied the dry decks earlier. So what you're gonna do is just come back, just sand it down, and it should smooth out, nice and flat. Same thing here, come back, get all this excess dry decks, get really nice and smooth down. And really what I'm using is I'm using a 120 grit sandpaper or sanding block to really kind of smooth out this wall here. And now we're ready for painting and cutting these holes. So just apply wherever you applied your dry decks, go back and fix it with a little bit of sanding, and then you're ready for paint. All right, and you're done with your project. So some last minute tips here to let you know. We used a 120 grit sandpaper. I used a DAP Dry Decks product as my compound to fill in the holes. And then also the spatula just came from the local hardware store. The overall cost for this entire project was less than $25 to go through and do my entire room here. Some other things I want to let you guys know as well. If you have other tips or comments about this project and you want to share your own project with us about as well, go ahead and use that comment section for that. If you're looking for other homeowner resources, be sure to take a chance to look at our website. We also have those included in our home inspection reports so that way you can find this information easily.